At what point did you lose faith in the fun parent? My daughter's best buddy, and they will always be best friends. When I asked my 8-year-old daughter, Emma, if she wanted to get married, she said, "Mommy, I'm already married." Mark, Chloe's father, was the entertaining parent who prepared pancakes in the shape of their initials and constructed blanket forts till midnight. When Emma had her next overnight there, she literally counted down the days. However, when the next invitation arrived, Emma claimed to be too exhausted, which sounded strange coming from a child who was constantly on the go. The next week, I discovered Emma's backpack, tucked behind her library books, with a crumpled copy of Chloe's mom's invitation to Saturday's sleepover. She refused to look at me and muttered something about forgetting when I questioned her about it. I discovered a camera in her backpack that same day, one of those pricey electronic ones. She froze when I asked her where it originated from. "Mom, it's for a class assignment." "For what class?" "I'm not sure. Just give me some space." She let out a scream. She had never raised her voice till then. Emma changed from being my little tomboy who wore dinosaur shirts and believed that brushing her hair was optional to begging for pedicures, wondering whether she was attractive enough, and being obsessed with scented lotions from Target in a matter of weeks. One morning, she spent 20 minutes simply staring at herself in front of the mirror. When I inquired about her activities, she replied, "Making sure I look right." She was 8 years old. Emma overheard Chloe's mother calling about the sleepover on Friday and began sobbing uncontrollably. Simply sprinted to her room and shut the door. Everything changed when pickup arrived at school the following Monday. As usual, Mark called out, "Hey, Emma," waving from the other side of the parking lot. My daughter's entire body was hidden behind me as she gripped my hand so tightly that her fingernails sank in. She was trembling all over. She kept looking in the car's mirrors to make sure we weren't being followed by his vehicle. She claimed that since she was almost an adult, she needed to look more mature and would no longer wear her beloved dinosaur blouse, which she had worn twice a week for months. Additionally, I saw that she had money out of nowhere, random dollars in her piggy bank that she was unable to explain. "I found it," she would confess. However, since a 9-year-old doesn't simply find $50, none of it made sense. She shook her head so angrily that I believed she had injured her neck when my husband and I gently inquired as to if Mr. Mark had done anything. She simply said, "No, no, 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 no," repeatedly. In her room, more items kept popping up. She had so much nail polish she could run a salon, a magnifying mirror I had never purchased, concealer from a brand I don't even use, and these handmade friendship bracelets, but strange ones with beads that spelled out things like nice and better. She began using our bathroom scale to weigh herself every morning, wondering if she appeared overweight while sucking in her tiny belly. I attempted to view the pictures on that camera one day. "Those are private." Emma screamed as she snatched it and flung it so forcefully against the wall that it broke. Chloe's parents were horrified when we spoke with them. "I don't understand," Mark insisted. "We were friends. Last month, we constructed the cardboard rocket ship." Emma, however, was particularly afraid of him. Not the mother of Chloe. Not you, Chloe. Only Mark. She was having a meltdown about getting a blister on her foot from new shoes one day, and I discovered her sobbing in the middle of her bedroom. Until I stayed up one night and pressed my ear to my daughter's door, none of it made sense. I had no idea what I was searching for until I heard a camera snap. I rushed right in. "I am sorry, Mommy. Don't be upset, please." In my throat, ball rose. Sitting on the floor, my 9-year-old daughter was photographing her feet in the ideal stance. As she sobbed into my chest, I rushed over and gave her a firm embrace. "Mark informed me that you and Daddy were in need of cash. This would be helpful," he said. "I apologize, Mommy, for being cruel. I simply wanted to stop being unattractive. I also have a broken heart." At last, she gave me the camera at that point. It was brand new. I was going to tear Mark to pieces with my bare hands after seeing what was worse than I could have ever imagined when I flipped through the pictures. Emma's entire body trembled against mine, and my hands were shaking so much that I could hardly hold onto the camera. These pictures were of my 9-year-old daughter, and they featured her feet in various positions, painted toenails, and ankles rotated precisely like the advertisements you see online. Emma sobbed into my shirt as my husband rushed through the door and gave me a quick glance before I mumbled the words "call 911" over her head. As I held Emma closer, feeling her tiny body tremble against me, he picked up his phone and went into the hallway. I could hear him recounting what we had discovered as Emma repeatedly apologized as the 911 operator moved him to a special hotline for child abuse. They advised him not to get in touch with Mark or notify him in any manner, as doing so may jeopardize the investigation, and we wanted to protect all of the evidence. When he returned, my husband carefully drew Emma away from me and explained that they would be making hot chocolate with additional marshmallows. She accompanied him, but she kept turning to face me as if she was afraid I would vanish. I carefully placed the camera inside a paper bag I took out of the kitchen drawer, being cautious not to touch it too much. I could hardly write the time and date on the exterior because my hands were still shaking so much. I grabbed those too and placed them in a different bag because the broken parts of the first camera were still in a box in my closet. After what seemed like an eternity of 2 hours, a woman arrived at our house accompanied by a policeman. When Helen Brooks identified herself as someone who assists children in such circumstances, she spoke softly and with gentle eyes. Despite his large stature and solemn appearance, Daniel Carter smiled at Emma when she came around the corner from the living room. In order to feel secure and at ease, Deborah asked if she might speak with Emma in her room. From the doorway, I observed Deborah and Emma sitting on the floor while she took several dolls out of her luggage. Inquiring gently about Mark and the games they played, she let Emma to participate with them. Mark said it was our secret game and that I had to grip the door frame to keep from running in there, Emma stated in a little voice. Detective Dobson began photographing Emma's room, paying particular attention to the several nail paint bottles arranged on her dresser. He put on gloves and packed everything carefully, including the makeup, the mirrors, and those strange word-adorned friendship bracelets. He told Emma about the chain of custody and how it would help establish what had transpired. Emma wouldn't let go of any of us, so that first night was the worst. She slept directly between my husband and me, waking up every hour to check on us and weep. Her voice continued to plead, "Don't let Mark come," and we repeatedly assured her that he would no longer be able to harm her. Deborah returned the following morning with a folder containing information about a facility known as the Child Advocacy Center. She clarified that it was a unique location created especially for children, where Emma could record an interview to avoid having to retell her story. The structure was not at all like a police station. It featured nice rooms and toys. While my husband was preparing Emma's breakfast, I called the school and informed them that we were concerned about pickup safety. The principal simply stated that Mark's name would be noted in their system and that new processes will be implemented immediately without asking any questions. To ensure that one of us could constantly be with Emma, my husband called his boss and made plans to work from home for the upcoming weeks. We established new guidelines, such as ensuring that all electronics remain in the living room where we can see them and that the bathroom door remains slightly open during bath time. Emma followed me everywhere, even to the kitchen, to fetch me a glass of water. In case she became frightened, we placed a small nest of blankets on our bedroom floor for her to sleep in. As a nurse held Emma's hand, the pediatrician they referred us to examined her very gently, looking for any physical symptoms. My chest ached again as Emma insisted on asking if the doctor thought she was attractive. Detective Dobson informed me over the phone that their IT staff was trying to recover the destroyed images from both cameras. Although they intended to make the strongest case possible, he claimed that what they had already discovered was sufficient to arrest Mark. Emma refused to wear anything Mark had seen her wearing, so we had to purchase her new clothes. At Target, she chose dinosaur shirts once more without asking to see the nail polish for the first time in months. She would scream every night and scuttle between us, holding on to her plush elephant till its fur was matted. We absolutely stopped utilizing cameras. To keep her from seeing the camera lens, even our phone remained face down. While I was preparing Emma's breakfast the following morning, Chloe's mother called to inquire as to why she hadn't seen us in weeks. As I searched for words that wouldn't ruin her world, my throat constricted. Deborah had instructed us to simply state that the girls were the subject of an ongoing investigation. When she inquired as to whether things were all right between the children, I could hear bewilderment in her tone. I watched Emma push cereal around her bowl and mimic Deborah's words, which made my stomach turn. Before our appointment at the Child Advocate Center came, 3 days passed slowly. The structure, which was painted in vibrant colors and had a playground visible through the windows, appeared more like a daycare than anything official. As we entered the lobby, which was stocked with books and toys, Emma's hands remained clasped in mine. A dark-haired woman with gentle eyes approached and bent down to Emma's level. She asked Emma about the toy elephant she was carrying and introduced herself as Maria Torres. Nora took us to what appeared to be a living room, complete with plush couches and further toys. She clarified that while my husband and I waited here, she and Emma would converse in a separate room. Emma gave us 3 quick glances before following Nora into a hallway lined with children's artwork. Sitting on a couch facing a large aquarium, my spouse and I observed the yellow and blue fish swimming in circles. Neither of us could concentrate on the TV, quietly showing cartoons in the corner or the magazines on the coffee table. One of us would glance at the wall clock every few minutes before returning to the fish's observation. Emma was still playing with toys in the other room when Nora returned an hour later without her. She sat across from us and stated that in order to preserve the integrity of the inquiry, she was unable to provide specifics. However, she attested that Emma had revealed troubling habits and that all of this had been documented for legal reasons. Emma wouldn't have to repeat her narrative to several persons as a result. After that, we were met by Detective Dobson in the parking lot to get the shattered camera parts one had been storing in a shoebox. As he explained that their tech team was excellent, he put on gloves and carefully moved each item into an evidence bag. They might be able to retrieve erased pictures that might demonstrate the beginning of things and strengthen the case. Mark texted me that night to ask if Emma would like to attend Chloe's birthday celebration the following weekend. When I showed it to my husband, my hands were shaking, but he snapped a snapshot right away and sent it to Detective Dobson. I wanted to yell at Mark to never get in touch with us again and hurl my phone against the wall. Instead, as my husband held me and I trembled with anger, I erased the message without replying. For Emma's medical examination the following morning, we returned to the Child Advocate Center. The pediatrician was a gray-haired woman who moved slowly and spoke softly enough for Emma to see all she did. Emma's hand was held by a nurse as the doctor examined her, searching for any physical indications that something had gone wrong. Emma was constantly asking the doctor if she was doing well, whether she looked well, and if he thought she was attractive. As I became aware of how far Mark had manipulated me, every question caused my heart to shatter into little fragments. Following the test, Nora joined us in that cozy room and shared her knowledge of grooming strategies. Predators have long used friendship bracelets with phrases like pretty and better to make children feel unique and mature. The purpose of all the mirrors and beauty items was to make Emma fixate on her appearance and feel as though she had to look a certain way. In addition to being paid, the money gave her the impression that she was making a significant contribution to her family. Emma was in her treatment session with a play therapist when Detective Dobson called 2 days later. He claimed that a judge had granted them permission to search Mark's home and all of his electronic equipment. That afternoon, the police would carry it out, and Chloe's family would learn about the inquiry. When they recognized what was going on, he cautioned us to be ready for contact. In fact, Chloe's mother's number was on the screen when my phone called at 3 o'clock. When she told me the police were searching her home and had taken Mark to the station, her voice was broken and she was crying. She said that Mark must have made a mistake and that he would never harm anyone, particularly Emma, whom he loved as if she were his own daughter. However, I could already hear the uncertainty beginning to seep into her voice as she uttered it. She was still crying when I ended the call by telling her that I couldn't discuss anything due to the investigation. For the remainder of the day, my hands continued to shake as I checked the locks on our windows and doors. 3 days later, we took a car to a facility with cartoon animals painted on the windows for Emma's first therapy session. I observed from a chair in the corner while Emma and the therapist, who had curly red hair, sat on the floor. She asked Emma if she wanted to create something after bringing out a large box of wooden blocks. Emma began building a tall wall that nearly reached her chin by stacking blocks high. Then, behind the wall she had constructed, she placed a small plastic doll that she had discovered in the toy box. Emma replied, "She needs to hide from the bad cameraman," and the therapist simply agreed and jotted down a note or a notebook. They played for an hour while I watched my daughter use toys to express her worry while trying not to weep. Now available on Spotify is Requested Reds. See the link in the comments or description. Detective Dobson called to inform us about the cameras when we arrived home that afternoon. Both cameras, including the smashed one Emma had flung toward the wall, had their images recovered by the IT staff. According to him, they discovered hundreds of photos saved on memory cards that dated back 3 whole months. He told us that although there was sufficient evidence to bring criminal charges, the legal process would take a very long time, possibly a year or longer, before a trial could take place. Hearing that go on for so long made my stomach turn, but at least they had evidence of what Mark had done. We had to attend a parent education event at the Child Advocacy Center 2 days later. As the counselor discussed how children respond to trauma, the 6 other parents in the room sat in a circle. She clarified that children may pee the bed once more, experience nightmares, or become irrationally clingy or irate. When the counselor mentioned children blaming themselves, one mother broke down in tears. I also came to the realization that this nightmare wasn't exclusive to our family. Knowing that other parents were going through the same terrible things was somewhat comforting. The counselor encouraged us to be patient since healing takes time and provided us with materials about coping mechanisms and warning flags. I wanted to hit something after we received some awful news that weekend. Following his arrest, Mark was free to walk around after posting bond. He was prohibited from approaching Emma, our home, or her school by a restraining order. It didn't feel like enough to be at least 500 feet away. I therefore purchased security cameras for our home from the electronics store. While I downloaded the app to my phone, my husband put them on all the windows and doors. I think I looked at that app 50 times a day. Emma began to have terrible nightmares in which she would wake up crying about cameras monitoring her every time I heard a car drive by or the doorbell ring. Because the cameras could see her through the walls, she would run into our room and wail. We discovered that having tablets and phones nearby was making things worse. Thus, each night we gathered them all up. Emma got to keep the key under her pillow after she assisted me in locking them in a kitchen drawer. Although it was a little detail, it gave her a sense of power over our home's cameras. Detective Dobson contacted with more information around 2 weeks after Emma had told the Advocacy Center staff what had transpired. Another family had reported that their daughter was acting strangely after attending playdates at Mark's place. When they tried to take photos for the school yearbook, their 6-year-old child began to weep and have accidents. According to the investigator, the probe was expanding and they were also examining whether Mark had harmed other children. I was relieved that people would now believe us, but I was also sad that there would be more victims. Deborah contacted a few days later to let her know that Chloe's mother wanted to know if the girls could see one another. She was staying with her parents across town after leaving the residence with Chloe. The mother desired a secure, supervised playtime for the girls at the Advocacy Center. Emma became very quiet and nibbled at her fingernails when I asked whether she wanted to visit Chloe. "What if she's mad at me for telling on her dad?" she said. Emma became frightened even after I assured her that Chloe was not angry and that she missed her friend. The therapist believed it could benefit both daughters, so we decided to give it a try nevertheless. The following week, the playdate took place in a designated space within the Advocacy Center, complete with art supplies and toys. The girls were seated at a small table, while Deborah and a therapist were seated in chairs. Initially, neither girl spoke. They just used markers to color large sheets of paper. My daddy went away. Chloe murmured very softly, and Emma glanced up at her. When Emma retorted, "He was bad to me," they continued coloring together until Chloe simply nodded. They no longer played as well as they once did. Just silent coloring side by side. No giggling or pretend games. We then had a meet with Chandler Lee, the prosecutor, who was dressed in a gray suit and carried a briefcase filled with documents. He gave an explanation of the accusations they were making against Mark. Something about putting children in danger and creating exploitation stuff. I tried to concentrate on what he was saying regarding the procedure, even though the words made me feel nauseous. Although he cautioned us that these cases typically result in plea agreements, he stated that Mark might face up to 20 years in jail if found guilty. Because courts are harsh on child victims, the criminals typically receive far less time in prison than they deserve. Even though it wasn't fair, he stated we should be ready for that possibility. When my husband was putting Emma in later that week, he discovered juice boxes and crackers concealed beneath the bed. She had fruit snacks in her dresser drawers and granola bars in her closet. She broke down in tears and stated she had no idea why she was doing it when we questioned her about it. The therapist said that children who have experienced trauma may hoard food or other items as a way to feel safe and in control. Instead of worrying about it, we just started putting nutritious snacks in a special basket in her room so she could take them anytime she wanted. While I was preparing lunch 2 weeks later, Chandler called my cell phone to inform me that Mark's attorney wanted to speak with me regarding a potential plea agreement. According to the attorney, his client wants to avoid a trial in order to spare everyone the agony. Chandler added that because the children had to relive everything, cases involving child victims were extremely difficult for them. He advised us to carefully consider our options, but in the end, it was up to us. After Emma went to bed that evening, my husband and I sat at the kitchen table and engaged in hours of round-the-clock conversation. We didn't want to cause Emma any more suffering, but we also wanted Mark to receive the harshest penalty possible. When I visited Emma in her room the following afternoon, I saw her seated on the floor with all of her costume outfits. She was chopping each piece of clothing into tiny pieces with the safety scissors she had taken out of her art box. Like confetti, the carpet was covered with pink tulle from her princess attire. She stated she no longer wanted to be lovely as she looked up at me, tears streaming down her cheeks. Without a word, I knelt down next to her and assisted her in chopping up the remainder. This was Emma's way of taking charge and rejecting what Mark had made her feel she had to be, the therapist later stated. In fact, she added, it was a positive indication that Emma was working through her emotions. 3 months passed slowly, filled with lawyer phone calls, paperwork, and meetings. After that, we had to attend a pre-trial hearing at the courts. Emma could wait in a separate room at the courts if she wanted to attend. The victim advocate suggested at the last minute, but my mom came to watch her while we went. We brought Emma some snacks and coloring materials because she expressed a want to be close to us. As we entered the courthouse, the advocate led her to a room equipped with a TV and toys. I hadn't seen Mark since learning what he had done until then. He was seated at a table with his attorney, who was dressed in a gray suit that was too large for him. He appeared smaller than I had remembered, like if he had somehow shrunk. His face appeared older, and his hair was thinner. Instead of screaming at him, I chose to look straight ahead. During the hearing, the attorneys primarily discussed timelines, evidence, and other legal matters that I didn't fully comprehend. An hour or so later, we returned to retrieve Emma from the children's room. When we entered, she was coloring a picture of butterflies and didn't even look up. Mark had been down the hall, but she was unaware of it. That day, the judge rendered a ruling that fundamentally altered our situation. If the case proceeded to trial, she agreed to use Emma's Advocacy Center interview as evidence. Emma would no longer have to appear in court and respond to Mark's attorney's inquiries as a result. I broke down in tears in the corridor as soon as the relief hit me. My spouse took hold of my hand and gave a firm squeeze. We wouldn't have to witness our infant daughter being questioned about the most terrible event that had ever occurred to her. Deborah contacted me a week later to share some family news concerning Chloe. After filing for divorce, the mother left their home to live with her parents on the other side of town. She had moved Chloe to a new school and brought her with her. Deborah showed us a letter the mother had written to express regret for not noticing what was going on. She pledged to do whatever it takes to support her daughter's recovery and said that she was putting Chloe into therapy. I cried when I read the letter because I could sense how hurt she was. Like us, her entire world had burst when she became a mother. Emma's school counselor contacted me about this time with something that lightened my heart. Emma had been spending recess time with younger children who appeared depressed or excluded. She added, she had been showing them how to draw butterflies and sharing her goodies. According to the counselor, it demonstrated that Emma's innate goodness persisted in spite of everything. It was the first concrete indication that the kind girl we knew before this horror was returning. After that, Chandler called with some news that physically sickened me. Mark had been selling some of the photos online, according to information discovered by the forensic team looking into his systems. Since it was now a federal offense, everything changed. Chandler clarified that the FBI's involvement in the probe was beneficial for our case. Mark would have to serve a lot more time in prison if found guilty of federal crimes. I puked in the kitchen sink at the idea of those photos being out there somewhere. I sobbed and dry heaved while my husband held my hair back. Emma wasn't in her bed when I went to snuggle her in that evening. After checking the restroom, I heard a faint noise coming from her closet. With her blanket and pillow, she had created a small nest inside. She stated the closet seemed safer than her bed as she glanced up at me. We made the closet as comfortable as possible rather than attempting to persuade her to return to the bed. The following day, I added extra pillows and her favorite stuffed animals, and my husband set up twinkle lights that ran on batteries. To enable her to read, we placed a small battery-operated lantern inside. She could sleep in the closet if it gave her a sense of security. Mark's parents wanted to meet with us, according to a lawyer who called us 2 days later. They offered us a sizable sum of money in exchange for our consent to request that the prosecutor drop the accusations. In addition to additional compensation, the attorney stated that they were willing to cover all of Emma's therapy and medical expenses. Without even talking to me about it, my spouse hung up. No amount of money could force us to assist Mark in avoiding the repercussions of his actions. When we immediately called Chandler to inform him about the offer, he said it demonstrated their awareness of Mark's wrongdoing. It had been 4 months since that terrible night when I discovered Emma holding the camera. With twice-weekly therapy sessions and check-ins with Deborah, we had established new habits. Emma refused to wear anything that brought back memories, and she continued to sleep in her closet. However, she wore something I hadn't seen in months when she emerged from her room that morning as we prepared for therapy. It was her dinosaur shirt, which she had stashed in the back of her drawer and wore twice a week. She gave me a tense expression as if she were requesting permission. For the first time in ages, I had to turn away to save her from witnessing my happy tears. As Emma settled into the play area with the dolls and blocks, the therapist noticed me wiping my face and gave me a slight nod. Chandler contacted the same day regarding a second family who came forward with a 6-year-old daughter who had attended playdates at Mark's house and began exhibiting similar symptoms, such as questioning if she was attractive enough and carrying money in her backpack that couldn't be explained. The mother called the police right away after seeing pictures on her daughter's tablet. Chandler claimed that their desire to join our case would strengthen the prosecution's case. 3 days later, we met them at the prosecutor's office, and their little girl, who was much younger than Emma, had the same terrified expression in her eyes, which made me cry again. In the waiting area, the mother took hold of my hand, and we both began to cry silently since we could sense each other's suffering without using words. The following week, Detective Dobson summoned us to a conference room with news that caused the room to go silent. While searching Mark's computers, the forensic team discovered evidence of 3 other possible victims, whose images matched those of children from various locations Mark had visited for business meetings. Mark's bail was immediately revoked because he was now deemed a flight risk with victims in different jurisdictions, as the investigation was now extending over state lines and the FBI was taking over portions of the case. When we learned that Mark was returning to prison, my husband pumped his fist. However, the thought of all the children he had harmed made me feel horrible. The therapist had been expecting anything new to happen during therapy that week. Emma hurled one of the toy vehicles she was playing with against the wall and yelled that she detested Mark and wished for his permanent removal. As the therapist quietly observed her kicking the dollhouse and flinging pillows around the room, she later informed us This was actually good progress because Emma was finally expressing anger instead of just fear and shame. According to the therapist, Emma's transition from fear to rage indicated that she was beginning to realize that what had happened wasn't her fault and that she had every right to be upset about it. Deborah recommended that we try a support group for families who were dealing with child exploitation 2 weeks later. And we made the decision to attempt telling our tale to strangers, despite my reservations about it. About 15 other families attended the conference, which took place in a church basement. Emma played with other children who had experienced similar things in the adjacent room, while the parents sat in a circle and chatted. A mother described how her daughter no longer slept in her own bed, and a father described discovering images on his son's phone. And after hearing their tales, I understood that we weren't as isolated as I had initially believed. The group facilitator provided us with phone numbers for crisis support, as well as resources regarding trauma therapy and legal representation. And I thought we might be able to overcome this for the first time in months. Emma became friends with Macy, a girl in a similar circumstance, and the two of them colored pictures together as the adults discussed coping mechanisms and warning indicators that we had all overlooked. Several parents swapped phone numbers following the conference, and we established a group text for support on the bad days, which were more frequent than the good ones. Then, even though I knew it was inevitable, Chandler called with news that made my stomach turn. In exchange for 15 years in federal prison, lifetime registration as a sex offender, and a ban from all contact with minors, including his own daughter Chloe, Mark's attorney wanted to meet with him to discuss a plea agreement. Chandler clarified that Emma would be spared further hardship by not having to testify or have her taped interview presented in court. However, it also meant that if Mark was found guilty at trial, he would not be subject to the maximum penalty of 25 years. My husband spent the entire night pacing the kitchen, saying that 15 years wasn't enough for what Mark had done to all those children, and he wanted Mark to spend eternity rotting in prison. I was furious too, but I couldn't help but think about Emma having to endure a trial while defense attorneys tried to paint her as a liar or claim she didn't understand what had happened. After debating what was best for Emma against what Mark deserved until 3 a.m, we ultimately agreed to endorse Chandler's recommendation because he had experience with hundreds of these instances. The following day in treatment, Emma worked on a body safety poster that the therapist had recommended. On it, she drew guidelines about how her body belonged to her, that no one should touch her intimate areas, and that she should not keep touching secrets. Next to her dinosaur posters, she mounted it on the wall of her bedroom after decorating it with stickers and markers. And in the hallway where she couldn't see me, I started crying as I saw her regain some control over her own body. I had not seen Emma with that camera for 5 months. She still got frightened at night when she heard noises outside. So one morning she came to us and asked if we might buy a dog for protection. Emma passed all the pups when we visited the animal shelter that weekend and paused at a cage containing a golden retriever that had been returned twice for being too quiet and uninteresting. His name was Guard, and could we please take him home? She asked, looking up at us as the dog instantly placed his head in her lap while she sat on the floor. Every night, Guard slept outside Emma's door and followed her throughout the house as if he knew his role was to protect her. Chandler called 3 weeks later to let us know that the plea agreement was proceeding and that Mark would formally confess to the crime in court on Monday. We were to watch from a different room on closed-circuit television so Emma wouldn't have to see him. Holding hands, we sat in that little chamber while Mark, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, responded in the affirmative when the court asked if he had distributed offensive pictures of several young victims. In a way that all the meetings and therapy sessions hadn't, hearing him publicly acknowledge what he had done made it true. And then, while my husband held my hair, I puked in the courthouse restroom. The following day, Chloe received a letter from her mother expressing her regret for all that had transpired, stating that she missed Emma and couldn't comprehend why they were no longer able to play together. However, she did not attribute any of it to Emma. Emma wanted to respond, and, as I typed, she dictated that she missed Chloe too, but that they needed more time to become friends again. They might be able to play at a park with both mothers there when she recovers, but not just yet. We began family therapy in the downtown location with the large windows and waiting room toys 3 weeks after receiving the letter. My husband went first, claiming to have had visions in which he located Mark and beat him with a baseball bat. The therapist had us all sit in a circle on these blue cushions on the floor. His hands were shaking, but he spoke so casually, as if discussing the weather. I told him how I kept going back and watching every play date to see what indications I missed, and how I checked on Emma 20 times a night. Emma just constructed little walls around a small plastic girl while playing with the sand tray in the corner. According to the therapist, trauma impacts entire families, and we would all work through it together. However, I could see that when she spoke Mark's name, my husband wanted to hit anything. After that, we visited every Tuesday and gradually began discussing everyday topics as well, such as Emma's grades and my husband's stress at work. Emma, who had been avoiding attention, surprised us by signing up for the school talent show 6 months after I saw her with the camera. She chose a song about bravery and spent weeks practicing in her room while guards sat outside her door. We watched her enter that large stage wearing her dinosaur shirt and brand new, glittery shoes from the front row on the night of the performance. The first phrase made her voice tremble, but soon became stronger. By the time it was all over, she was yelling the words "Stand tall." No one in that auditorium explained why this was so important. When she was done, however, the entire place erupted, and for 3 full minutes, everyone got up and clapped. When she exited the stage, the principal gave her an extra-large embrace because some of the parents were crying. Chandler called us 2 days later regarding Mark's sentencing session, and he offered for us to observe from a different room once more. Emma requested to see butterflies in the garden outside when we entered the school after we dropped her off there that morning. Mark stood in his orange jumpsuit as the judge went over all the charges in front of a crowded courtroom full of other parents and detectives. The court said society had a responsibility to shield children from predators like him and described his conduct as an unforgivable betrayal of innocent people. Mark was given a life sentence as a sex offender and 15 years in federal prison without the possibility of early release. Emma was still observing those butterflies when we picked her up, and she inquired as to whether the evil guy would be gone for good. And for a very long time, we said yes. The next week, we received documentation from FBI Victim Services stating that they would pay for Emma's whole course of therapy and any associated medical expenses. Even though Emma still experienced nightmares most nights, insurance kept rejecting claims, claiming that therapy wasn't medically necessary. This was a huge relief. Because of the finances, we were able to continue seeing the trauma-aware, skilled therapist rather than anybody our insurance would pay. Emma's therapist recommended that she write letters to her younger self during one session, bringing out special paper and markers. Emma began writing to the young girl she once was, telling her that she had done nothing wrong and that it wasn't her fault. She sketched butterflies on one side and dinosaurs on the other. According to the therapist, this indicated that she was beginning to integrate both aspects of herself. She would add a new letter each week and adorn them with glitter and stickers. Emma requested if we could go shopping for new clothes 7 months after everything began, but she preferred to choose them herself this time. She spent an hour examining everything, handling various textiles, and holding shirts up to herself in the mirror while we were at Target. She selected a frock with butterflies on it, 2 pairs of glittery sneakers, and 3 dinosaur shirts. She stated at the register that she preferred clothing that fit her rather than what other people were wearing. The court ordered Mark's house, cars, and funds to be sold in order to make compensation to all of the victims, and we received official notification of this decision the same week. There would be a positive outcome from all of his evil, since the funds will be placed into a trust for Emma's future educational and therapeutic needs. There was enough, according to the attorney managing it, to pay for years of treatment and college eventually. Emma's regular therapist introduced her to EMDR, which involved thinking about the unpleasant memories while following a light with her eyes. After 3 sessions, her nightmares decreased from occurring every night to perhaps twice a week, which may sound strange. The guard would spend the entire night lying next to her bed as she resumed sleeping in her own bed rather than on our floor. She claimed to have slept through the entire night without waking up when she arrived for breakfast one morning. We would exchange updates about our children in a private group text that the other families from the probe had begun around this time. We all discussed what worked for us when a mother mentioned that her daughter was afraid to return to school. We were encouraged when another father reported that their son had resumed practicing sports. While the kids were in group therapy, we got together for coffee once a month, and it was comforting to know we weren't the only ones in this mess. Emma approached me 8 months after that awful night with the camera to ask if she might have a birthday celebration for the school children. This was significant because, other than the therapy group, she hadn't wanted to spend much time with other children. She asked if we could have the dinosaur theme at the park with the large playground. We began organizing, and she selected dinosaur plates and glasses and compiled a list of 10 children to invite. She even suggested that the cake be chocolate with green frosting and asked to assist in making it. My husband set up tables in the backyard while I spent the morning hanging green streamers on the day of the celebration, which arrived sooner than I had anticipated. The guard stood by the door, watching as Emma helped frost the cake with thick green icing and adhered plastic dinosaurs to the edges. As Emma asked on the invites, cars began to drive up around us as well, and children rushed through our gate with wrapped gifts and dinosaur shirts. After a minute standing by the door, she hurried out to greet them, and when they all began discussing the decor, I saw her shoulders loosen up. Emma instantly joined in on the kids, pretending to be various dinosaurs, playing the role of a T-Rex chasing the smaller ones around the yard. Emma truly giggled when her pal, Macy, roared so loudly that the neighbors looked over their fence. It was the genuine belly laugh I hadn't heard in months, not a courteous one. As we both heard that boom fill our backyard as it used to, my husband took hold of my hand and gave me a firm squeeze. When more children arrived, they divided into teams for dinosaur battles in which one team had to guess while the other team acted out various prehistoric animals. Emma was in the center of it all, pretending to be a brontosaurus and tumbling over when the asteroid struck. Emma had requested if they might join for a little while, but my entire body tightened when I saw Chloe's mom's car turn up about an hour into the party. While her mother remained beside the car, Chloe got out with a small wrap parcel and started to move gently toward the backyard. Emma came up, and the two girls gave each other a brief, cautious hug as if they might shatter after they had been staring at each other for a long time. After giving her the gift and saying something I couldn't hear, Chloe left to join some other students from their class at a separate table. They performed at opposite ends of the gathering, but occasionally I saw them exchange glances that could eventually lead to a new friendship. Knowing that we all needed more time before things could return to normal, I nodded in response to Chloe's mother's wave from the car. The children went home, exhausted and drenched after cake and gifts. Emma, still sporting her party hat, then fell back on the couch. She abruptly woke up at bedtime that night and informed us that she had made up her mind about what she wanted to do with her life. Like Detective Dobson, she aspired to be a police officer who helped children and gave them a sense of security when unfortunate events occurred. For the first time in months, she seemed to believe us when we told her that she could be anything in the world. She showed us the poster she had created in therapy the next morning, which featured her body safety guidelines in purple ink. In order for other children to be aware of the rules if they happened to come, she intended to hang it in the hallway where everyone could see it. While she watched, we located a frame at Target and hung it directly between the family pictures. She scribbled, "I am brave and I am safe," at the bottom in green marker and requested if she may add one more rule. Like she was assembling two halves of herself, she covered it with stickers of dinosaurs on one side and stars on the other. I was really anxious to drop her off when she started 3rd grade 2 weeks later, but her new teacher was already aware of the modifications from the counselor. The teacher called me aside during the first parent-teacher meeting to inform me that Emma had been assisting the timid children during recess. When she saw that someone was sitting by themselves, she would ask them to play or offer her snacks to children who appeared depressed. Emma seemed to have a knack for spotting children who needed a buddy, according to the teacher. And I knew it was because she knew what it was like to be hurt. Pancakes shaped like initials caused her to freeze and stop eating, which also affected our Saturday morning routines. Rather, we began creating them in the shape of animals, with Emma selecting the animal every week. She would assist with pouring the batter into the shapes of her beloved velociraptors, elephants, or giraffes while standing on her step stool. It allowed her to take charge of something minor, yet significant. And with every decision she took, I saw her confidence increase. Emma came into the kitchen one evening while I was washing the dishes and wondered if bad people ever get better or if they remain bad forever. She and I sat down at the table and discussed how some people do awful things and have to deal with the repercussions. After giving it some thought, she declared that Mark had to spend a very long period in timeout due of his really poor behavior. Even though it was a very basic explanation of justice, it made perfect sense to a 9-year-old who was attempting to comprehend such a significant concept. I always put her to bed with Guard lying at her feet, watching after her. She would put her arms around my neck and declare her love for me to be greater than that of all dinosaurs, even the enormous ones. We were going on together, one day at a time, even though we weren't entirely better and might never be exactly like before. Every morning was a bit simpler than the last, and for the time being that had to be sufficient. That is the lesson to be learned from today's tale. I hope it provides you with something practical to carry around. To stay up to date, subscribe if you would want to receive further advice and lessons interwoven within stories.